Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here in college football, week 13. 1.5 weeks to go left in the season. Next week's sort of a partial championship week, so I don't know if there's a full slate going on. So really the last week of college football regular season games going on this week. It's been a fun ride with the man Dynamite. David, are you ready to get into college football rivalry week 13 of the college football season?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a lot of fun this weekend. I've got a lot of picks. I'm going boom or bust here this final week. I've been hovering around 500. I'm either going to finish way above it or way below it, or maybe I'll go 500 this week. I don't know, but this is probably my largest pick week of the season.
Yeah, we'll get into it. You went 5-4 last week, so you gained a game on there. You're 71, 72, and 2 overall on the season. But I will say, I went back and looked, and 8 of the 12 weeks on the season so far, you've had a winning record. And really, you had only one really bad week, which is the reason why you're under 500. That week 3, you went 4-13. A bad 17-game picking slate that went wrong. If you take away that week, you actually have had a really good season. So one really bad week, and the rest has been pretty solid for the Dynamite this year. All right, let's get into our games of the week. Did you want to touch on the new bracket? Cincinnati moves into playoff position. I think we state this every time, but none of it really matters. If Cincinnati wins out, they will be in. If they lose, they won't be in. So that's pretty much the thing. If Michigan wins out, they'll be in. If Ohio State wins out, they'll be in. So whoever wins out is getting in, except for Georgia, who can probably lose the SEC championship game and still get in.
Yeah, I think the thing to watch for right now is just, first off, this weekend between Ohio State and Michigan, the winner of that game will more than likely be in the playoffs. But then if Bama loses, they're probably going to be out, and so you look to see who's going to get that 4th spot. And I think right now you're looking at either Oklahoma State or Notre Dame. I think Oklahoma State gets the edge because they have the championship game, but it also is tougher for them because they have to win out and win that championship game. So I think those are the two teams waiting for the next spot in, and Michigan and Ohio State will get the other spot.
Yeah, well, it's good that Auburn's going in there on a big time high. Even better, thank God we didn't make a bet on Texas A&M, counting on Auburn to win that game. That would have been crazy.
I saw a rumor that Auburn's coach was actually considering, Pac-12 jobs, even though he just started there this year. So, I
think he probably figured out you have one bad year, though it's pretty much the same as every year Auburn's had, except for the one with Cam Newton, and they want to fire you. So might as well go out to the Pac-12, win 8 games, and everybody sort of shakes your hand and sings Kumbaya. All right, let's kick things off with the Turkey Day. Big game. It's good to see this game moved back to Thanksgiving Day. The Egg Bowl, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, probably the 2 best teams in the SEC West outside of Alabama, and probably the 2 teams that are the best in the SEC outside of Georgia and Alabama. You might could throw A&M in there, but I think we've both had enough of their season so far. So Ole Miss, Mississippi State 1.5 point favorites here at home in the Egg Bowl. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good football game. Every time I think I'm close to making a play here, I talk myself out of it by looking at the other side. I know that, it's not really much of a spread, but I think Ole Miss is probably the more talented team, but Mississippi State's really been rolling here lately, and they've got a killer offense, probably, even better than Ole Miss has been lately.
Yeah.
and with this being in Starkville, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, it's in Starkville.
So I think that's a big edge for them. The cowbell is tough. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. I think the one that I'm actually eyeballing, just because it's going to be a hard fought rivalry game, is the under 62. I know
Well,
these are both high powered offenses, and Ole Miss's defense is terrible. But I think usually those hard fought games tend to get a little uglier than normal, and can slow the game down a little bit.
yeah, the funny thing about the Old Miss is the under has been playing on them all season long. They're actually the top underplay of all the college football teams, including 6 straight undercovers. So they've really been hammering the under. 6 straight. I believe they were 9-2 on the under overall on the season, which is their record, 9-2 overall. So, we think of Ole Miss as being this explosive offense, but really, if you've watched probably the last 4 weeks for sure, but really, I think this goes back to about 6 to 8 weeks. They've sort of been in more 20 to 30 point score games than what we've been used to, where they're in the 40s and 50s. So their defense, I guess you can say, has played better. Mississippi State's defense has been really, really solid all along. And you mentioned this game being so sort of weird, because Ole Miss sort of plays right into Mississippi State's defensive hands, where their secondary is so strong. They don't get a lot of pass rush, but they're really good in the secondary. And then Ole Miss has been pretty good getting a pass rush, but that doesn't really affect Mississippi State, wise. They have that quick passing game. So I'm wondering if they can get an advantage on them there. But I do think Ole Miss has the better talent. I think they'll try to get numbers for Corral here with the Heisman Trophy, basically going to someone who probably doesn't deserve it. I'm going to be very disturbed if C.J. Stroud out of Ohio State somehow ends up with it. I'm not even sure he's in the top 10 of the best players on his own team. But hey, whatever. Let's hand it to the quarterback. But I want to take Mississippi State in this game, but, both you and I have been really, really heavy on betting Mississippi State all year long. And I think you just get fatigue when you bet on them over and over again and they keep winning. You want to be one of those who pulls off the train too early instead of too late. And I think that's both putting a little bit of fear in us. But I do think at Starkville, Mississippi State probably has a little bit of an edge here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to stay away. I'm going to enjoy the turkey, enjoy the hard fought football game. I can't convince myself either way. Like I said, if I do make a play, it'll probably be on the under.
Yeah. That being said, the NFL slate is complete and utter heart garbage. We already recorded the show with Achilles Reign today, and we had to come up with prop bets for the Thanksgiving Day games because nobody wanted to bet on the NFL ones, really. So maybe this is what I end up talking myself into. And one last ride for Mississippi State here. If I have a lean, it's going Mississippi State. We'll see if I can make myself not bet on this game, because that's what I've told myself probably is the better play. But hey, once 4, 5 o'clock rolls around and bad NFL games have been playing for 6 hours on my television, I'm liable to do anything and get a little action on the game there. All right, let's go to one of the reasons you did not have a better record, because you had pretty good picks, but 2 teams became your bane, and one of them is your faith in the Texas Longhorns, going on the road last week to the Mountaineers. Needless to say, they continue to play poorly. They play Kansas State here, -3 at home. Do the Longhorns get this turned around here, or does Kansas State, who was also a little bit of a disappointment for us, but do they get it turned around? Can they pull off the win to close out the season over K-State, or is K-State basically going to run it down their throats and hammer them like pretty much everybody else has been doing for the last 8 weeks?
So I went against my gut last week and took Texas, no matter, everything I've learned saying take West Virginia. I thought Texas was due. They were going to bounce back. Nope, they didn't. took the L. Kansas State really disappointed. I thought they were going to perform a lot better against and maybe get a Baylor on a letdown after a big win over Oklahoma, but emotionally, I think I wanted to take K-State in this game. I ended up backing off of that. I do have it play in this game, but it's on neither Texas nor Kansas State, so I'm just going to be betting on the score outcome later. But I don't really have much faith in either one of these teams at the moment.
Yeah, I think Kansas State burned me a little bit too much last week with their no-show on the offensive side of the ball. Now, granted, if you want to find yourself on offense, much like West Virginia found themselves on offense, Texas seems to be the recipe so far, but I'm not quite ready to grab 3 on the road in Texas, though. My gut tells me K-State's going to annihilate them much like everybody else has all season long.
Well, Texas has absolutely nothing to play for now. I think that was their 7th loss last week, so they're out of bowl contention.
Well, I was going to get into it on the a couple games, but per as become the regular now, there are not enough teams to fill bowl slots, so 5-win teams are going to get into bowls. Now, granted,
Texas would be the first choice.
They are not they rated on your, graduation rates. So, technically speaking, the top graduation rate is Rutgers.
Oh my God.
Technically, they don't have to win the game versus Maryland to qualify for a bowl, so they will probably get a bowl. I did not look where Texas stands in that ADP, but I'm assuming they're probably in and around there. So, if Texas win and gets to 5 wins, they might throw themselves in the ring for a bowl game. I don't know if they would agree to go to a bowl game, but, hey, whatever.
Here's the bigger question is, does the buyout get even more interesting with another loss for Texas at home?
I don't think Texas is even that crazy to literally be paying like $70 million to coaches who are no longer there, because I believe they're still paying Charlie Strong. I know they're still paying Tom Herman. So Sark and his $20 million, I don't know if even that's a bridge too far. Now, if he starts out next year and continues to lose, I'm pretty sure that trigger gets pulled pretty quick, but I think he probably survives, but not quite bold enough to go with K-State here after they played, so poorly the week before. But Texas, I don't know why you'd ever trust them as a favorite until possibly 5 games into next season and they beat up on, some very bad small school in Texas and maybe get right. But we'll move on to a big game out of the American Conference. Cincinnati goes to East Carolina. Cincinnati finally got their big win.
Yep.
Beat up on SMU last week, so 48-14 finally looked good.
Another one of my misses.
Yeah. I stayed away from that game just because I thought Cincinnati was due, and I had my eye on this game as the, tough one. It's 14 going on the road to East Carolina. East Carolina is now up to 7-4 on the season with their win over Navy. It seems like Cincinnati seems to play better with pressure on them. You saw them in that SMU game, and they came out and just dominated. Is this going to be a trap game? Are they going to sort of feel the pressure now that they're 2 wins away from basically going into the playoff, or does they dominate like they dominated last week versus SMU? I kind of like East Carolina here, 14. I like the way they played, but I could see Cincinnati getting on their roll here.
Yeah, East Carolina is paying attention to them much, but they're
that's because they were awful the first 2 weeks of the season.
Well, they were in that game with South Carolina. Yeah. Now, South Carolina wasn't playing that great at that point, but they were one weird play away from beating them, and they'd have 8 wins right now. Yeah. So Solid team. They're actually playing much better football as of late, as opposed to earlier in the year, like you said. And 14 is a lot. I think that's a good play. But I think Cincinnati's going to keep taking care of business, and I don't think they're going to blow it. They know this is their chance to prove to the world they deserve to be there, and I think they're gonna maintain. They didn't get that chance last year, even though they did go undefeated. I think they're going to get that chance this year.
Yeah, I think they for sure. We'll see what Houston probably has to offer in that championship game. That should be interesting. But from what I know from the Houston Cougars, I think East Carolina is probably their best chance to sort of trip up here. I like the spread here.
Championship.
Yeah, I still have it. I'm hoping Houston annihilates someone this week, and then I at least get something that I can maybe insure it with, because I have zero faith that they will be able to beat Cincinnati. But I take half my money on that one. But I am curious how this East Carolina game plays out. See if they can hang with them. Probably the biggest game in Myrtle Beach since David Gerard was there. Maybe a little bit of the Chris Johnson era, though they were never all that good with the Chris Johnson. But when David Gerard was there, they had a really, really good team. So this is probably their biggest game in a little while in East Carolina. So fun game, 14-point spread. Be interesting to see how that plays out. We'll flip things over to the big game in the Big Ten. Ohio State, Michigan. Ohio State coming off their big win versus Michigan State. I will admit it was impressive, but I don't think any of us were all that shocked that they torched Michigan State's bad secondary. The spread was 19. That should pretty much tell you all you need to know.
This was the Michigan State that I've been looking for all year, that I kept betting against, and they kept hanging around and winning games. And then I finally take them, and then the true Michigan State shows up.
Yeah.
Because that was just horrendous. Not only was it terrible defense, their offense kept turning the ball over, putting Ohio State in advantageous situations. I'm pretty sure that game was 28-0 about 5 minutes into the game.
Yeah. It wasn't even, there wasn't time to even flip the channel off my Premier League game before that game was wrapped up in that one. So Ohio State goes to Michigan. Michigan 10-1. How they aren't undefeated, no one will know how they blew that Michigan State game. But 8-point spread here. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but Michigan is actually the best team all year long against the spread at 9-2 ATS on the season. So they've been covering. Do they finally get their big win over Ohio State here, or is Ohio State going to do what they've done to them pretty much for the last 6 years or so?
Yeah, I think Ohio State's going to dominate. I see no reason why this game will even be close. I think the spread should be closer up to where the Michigan State spread was, other than Michigan plays a little bit better defense. But I just, the way Ohio State's passing game is right now, and he can throw it to, any of 4 or 5 guys, and they can break away and score a touchdown on any given play. I just think their offensive firepower is incredible, and I honestly can't wait to watch it match up against Georgia. I think that's what we're going to end up getting at the end of the year, and I think it's going to be a great football game.
Yeah, I don't have a play on Michigan here. I'm not going to take Ohio State because I do think Michigan defensively can at least give them a little bit of problems. We've seen C.J. Stroud, when he gets that pass rush on him, he tends to get a little bit more sloppy with the ball. My question comes whether Michigan can score on Ohio State. They still don't look that dynamic on offense, like they can, give Ohio State problems. And then they don't look like they could do what, an Oregon did or a couple of the other teams did, where they can just, sit down, grind away the clock, and pound the ball up the middle and continue getting first downs on, 2-3 plays at a time. So that's where I'd be leery of taking Michigan. But I don't think they have any better chance than probably this one here at the Big House. This is probably the most talented team, other than maybe that one in Harbaugh's first or second year there, where they missed it by about a yard, beating Ohio State. So I'll be curious to see if the defense can keep them in the game long enough. That would be probably the best strategy. If they can stay in the game up into the, late third, fourth quarter, I think the pressure goes on Ohio State, and then maybe they start pressing a little bit here.
Yeah.
We
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say they've got to find a way to, like you said, keep it at least close. Their biggest advantage, I think, is the fact that it is in the big house, and they need to keep that crowd into the game. If they give up 2 early touchdowns to Ohio State, it's going to be over quick.
Yeah, I think that place quiets down and maybe even starts to empty out with the way, things have gone in the past in this game. This is more for next week, but I'm curious if you see either of these teams having an issue in the Big Ten championship game versus, Wisconsin or Minnesota. We'll get into that game in a couple here, but do you think either of them would have any trouble with that game in Wisconsin or Minnesota?
I think Michigan would. I don't think Ohio State would. I
Yeah.
think their offense is just too dynamic right now.
Yeah, probably so. All right, let's move to the greatest game of the 90s, Florida State, Florida. Florida is a 3-point favorite here. Dan Mullen is no longer there. Do we get a show from Florida now that Mullen is no longer there? Florida State, a nice win over Boston College. I will say I watched that game. There was some finicky officiating, but I will ignore that. Loss is a loss, but Florida -3 here in the Swamp. I do think they'll play better this week than they have because they do want to beat Florida State, but I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
Well, I was actually going to say quite the opposite of you. I don't know what they actually have to play for. I guess maybe a little bit in the rivalry, but I don't think most of these guys that come in from out of state are as bought into these big rivalries as us as fans and college football fans are. So I don't know how much the rivalry plays into the motivation factor. And I don't know. I think most of these guys, they're going to lose transfer portal guys. There's probably guys that are thinking, hey, I need to stay healthy. I don't need to get out there and get hurt. So I don't, I was hoping for a little bit more points on the side of Florida State. Couldn't quite get them there. I'm going to stay away, but I don't think Florida's going to win this game.
I will say this. These are both 5-win teams. My guesstimation would be their ADP/graduation rate. Probably not in the upper tier. So I would be willing
the other thing is
to bet the 5-win doesn't get in for these two.
And even if they did, how many people Florida would probably have opt out in order to get to that transfer portal earlier and start scouting teams. So Florida's done, and I think their best players are out and looking for a place to jump ship. So I try not to smile too much about it as a Volunteer fan, but it brings me a little joy seeing someone else struggle in the offseason other than the Vols.
Yeah, I will say, if Florida State, from where they were at the start of the season, can manage to get this win and get bowl eligible, that's a pretty impressive close to the season. Maybe they have a little bit to look forward to going into next year. We get on this hamster wheel, it seems like, every year, and then, they start bad and then close okay.
I'll say if with this season, what the expectations were at the beginning of the year, if they managed to get bowl eligibles at 6-6, I think that's actually exceeding expectations.
Yeah.
So if they could get that momentum, and Florida's down, Miami's down, maybe Florida State can get back up on top in the state.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what we're considering on top, but right now it's very, very bad. Probably the worst the state of Florida has been in football in.
I guess UCF has got to be the best right now.
Well, they haven't been good either. So
I know, but
maybe there's an opportunity for Florida International if they can get that athletic direction right under there. All right, let's move on past the Florida State-Florida game of the 90s and move on to interesting game here in the Big Ten, Penn State, Michigan State. I'm curious your thoughts here. Penn State 1.5-point favorites going into Michigan State. I got to play on Penn State here because I think the sort of wall finally broke down here for Michigan State. I think Penn State goes in there. They put it on them as well. Now, it's interesting, if Michigan State closes poorly, but I think if you had said, in August when we were doing our preview, Michigan State was going to win 9 games and finish 9-3, everybody would be all for it. But now they have a coach who just signed a $95 million deal based on 2 okay coaching seasons under his belt. It probably would not be a great look for him to go out getting hammered again by Ohio State, then getting hammered by Penn State. So I'm curious if you have a play on this game or your thoughts on this game.
Well, I think if I heard correctly, driving around today, I think I heard that they're narrowing a big deal for James Franklin too. So I think
he got a 10-year deal as well. So it's
so
the new thing to now give coaches hundreds of millions of dollars and 10 years of security. Hey, college football, be mediocre, get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. So, just the fact that you are picking Penn State here kind of gives me a little relief there, because I was leaning the other way. I was actually leaning Michigan State, and I just couldn't talk myself all the way into it. I didn't feel strongly enough. I want to see Michigan State bounce back, just simply because I want to believe that I wasn't a complete idiot for taking the plus 18.5 last week, and maybe there's some sort of a good team there. But I think, like you said, Michigan State's true colors are showing, and Penn State's probably a solid enough team to take advantage of it as well. I'm probably not as sure of it as you, so I'm going to stay out of it, enjoy the game. But, yeah, I think Penn State's probably got a little bit of an edge here.
Yeah, I think my play is purely on Michigan State sort of coming back, to reality here than it is, a play on Penn State. I don't even know how many times I've taken Penn State this year, maybe once or twice. So I'm not a huge fan of them, but I just think this Michigan State team, you saw it last week. Really, you saw it 2 weeks ago when they went into Purdue and got beat up pretty good in that game as well. So, you've sort of seen them come back to sort of where their level actually is. So I think Penn State's defense can slow down their running game, slow down their offense. And, I don't want to say Penn State's offense is explosive, but they have managed to hit a handful of big plays on the outside, a couple times a game. So as we saw the last couple of weeks, Michigan State's secondary has been really, really poor. So I think you can get that, and that 1.5 number seems pretty nice, especially probably when you consider what the number probably was in like August when you were handicapping this game. All right, let's move on to probably the other mistake you made last week. The Oregon Ducks went into Utah. Did not fare too well in Utah. Really got beat badly, and then really...
Yeah, you called it.
Yeah, really capped it with the return right at the end of the half to sort of shut the door on championship hopes. It'll be interesting to see how this game plays out in the Pac-12 championship game. But first, one pick you did hammer. I think we both hammered. The Oregon State Beavers dominated Arizona State. They go into Eugene here. The Civil War is on. Oregon 7-point favorites here. What do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, I guess I'd looked at the schedule wrong. I thought this was in Corvallis all year at Oregon State, and I would have liked it a little bit more there. I probably would have taken that +7, but this being back in Oregon, and I just don't see them dropping the ball 2 weeks in a row. I think this is a mature team, and it's an experienced team, and they're going to bounce back and get the win for their home fans.
Yeah, I think this goes more, according to Oregon plans. My play still is on Oregon State, but it's more on the spread cover than the, out and out win. We've both watched Oregon play all season long. They just aren't a team who really beats teams up all that much. So I think my play still would be Oregon State. I thought they played really, really well in that, Arizona State game. They're bowl eligible with 7 wins for the first time in basically 2006. So it's a nice. I don't think they're quite ready to compete on Oregon's level. Now, what Oregon comes back with after just that mauling, I don't know. But being back home, I think the play's definitely there. And if you look at this rivalry, in Corvallis, Oregon State usually plays them pretty tough. In Eugene, they usually dominate them pretty good. There's a 69-10 in there. There's a 24-10 in there. There's a 52-42. It's tougher for Oregon State to leave Corvallis, go into Eugene and win. Yeah. But maybe after watching that game, they might sniff a little weakness in here. Oregon really, really looked bad. So I'm just curious how they bounce back in that one. So I'm going to take the spread cover in this one. I don't think Oregon State has much of a chance to win it, though. All right, let's move on to the Iron Bowl. This one lost every bit of luster that was there. It's fun to think, though, 3 weeks ago I was talking you into Auburn winning this game, and now it's a 20-point spread, and the money line is at 12-1. So that would have been a fun insure if our bet had gone into.
That could have been pretty interesting. Yes, I still have the
A&M
awesome experience of opening my BetMGM app every day and seeing that A&M SEC conference winner bet staring me in the face every day for the rest of this college football season. So I liked our shot a lot better, especially. You can definitely see why Bo Nix has been their starter for so long.
As disturbing as that is to utter.
Because the alternative is much, much worse, and this game is going to be ugly.
Is there any truth that Bruce Pearl is trying to recruit him to play basketball instead of quarterback?
I don't know anything about that, but I'm very tempted to take Bama here big because I don't think Auburn's got anything left other than the fact that it is the Iron Bowl, and it is Jordan Hare.
Yes.
Yeah, I should know this. But yeah, so it is at Auburn, and it is one of the biggest rivalries in football.
Technically, Alabama has not won in Jordan Hare since 2015. Well,
and this, as sad as this is to say, but it's the truth. This is a rebuilding year for Alabama. While they are still potentially a playoff team, they do have to beat Georgia, but this is not as good of a Bama team as we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years or so. That being said, they are much better than Auburn, and this is going to get ugly.
Yeah, only Bama rebuilds and possibly a 10-2 record with a loss in the SEC championship.
It's the truth, though.
So that pretty much sums up when you quote-unquote Alabama's rebuilding year. But yeah, I think this one they probably go in there and cruise. It didn't look like Auburn had much of anything.
Yeah.
I will say we aren't going to preview the South Carolina Clemson game, but honestly, I think Heupel probably gets some votes of Coach of the Year, but there were at least players on that team. What Frank Beamer has done at South Carolina is ridiculous. That team is starting a graduate assistant as its quarterback at the start of the year. And they managed to win games. They beat Auburn. That East Carolina win now looks like a really, really good win. So we aren't getting into that Clemson-South Carolina game, but, bullish job to what Frank Beamer's done and getting that team bowl eligible.
Shane Beamer.
Yeah, Shane Beamer, sorry. I've been around so long now, I have his father burned into my brain. Really hell of a job by, South Carolina, and that was sort of the cherry on top, beating Auburn. Now, granted, Auburn has looked like hot garbage for 3 weeks now, but anyway, 19.5 points. I don't think I can grab Bama on the 19.5 as poor as they've looked the last couple weeks, but I don't see much of a fight here out of Auburn unless that quarterback suddenly magically becomes good, or possibly shorter. Yeah, maybe a play on Alabama, but I don't think I'd touch this game right now.
Yeah. I think if they had looked a little bit stronger against Arkansas last week, I'd feel a little bit better at making a play on Bama here. But that was actually a really good football game between those
Yes,
two
it
teams.
was.
So
I will say if it's close, that means we might get some more points for Alabama in the SEC championship game. So I'm all bullish for that.
right now they're getting 4. I already looked at it.
Yeah, I know. I want it more up in the 7 territory from what I've seen. Also, I don't remember the last time Bama was an underdog, but I think it was
Oh gosh,
some sort of ridiculous, like Saban's first year in like week 3 or something. So I remember hearing this.
2009.
Yeah. It was something very long ago. So I'm almost half excited to take Bama with points for one time in my life. Of course, they might, beat Auburn by 70, and then we'll get an even point spread or something. All right, let's move on to the Big Ten, the other side of things. Wisconsin, Minnesota. Wisconsin continues to rollish. They did what Nebraska has pretty much done all year long. Play a close game, have Martinez throw picks, and not be able to score at the end of the game, and Wisconsin gets the win here. Wisconsin by 7 over Minnesota. The battle for the Axe. What do you like in this one?
I like Wisconsin. I like their ability to run the ball and control the football. I've been slowly buying into them more and more as the season goes on. Maybe not as a title contender up there with Michigan and Ohio State. I haven't looked at the weather yet, but I think it's going to be a typical Big Ten football game up in Minnesota this weekend.
Yeah, 38 degrees, wind 12 miles an hour. I like the play on Minnesota here for the 7, much like the Nebraska game. I just think it'll be close. Typically, this game is, when it's in Minnesota, it's sort of the flip of the, Oregon State game. When this game's been in Minnesota, it's usually a tighter game. Now, when it's, played in Wisconsin, Minnesota usually gets murdered. But I think Minnesota could, play it semi-tight here. I wasn't overly impressed with the way Wisconsin won that game versus Nebraska, so I think a similar game can break out. Now, that being said, Minnesota hasn't exactly looked like world beaters, coming off.
They did beat Nebraska, though.
Yes, they did, much in the similar way as everyone else. But, coming off losses to Illinois and Iowa, and, the get right of Indiana, who possibly the biggest disgrace of the season so far. So, 2 losses, then the, get right game versus Indiana. I don't quite know what to make of Minnesota, but I just thought 7 was a little too many points. So I got a feel about Minnesota, but I will say Wisconsin's defense might render them scoreless and then get a couple turnovers and they cover, which is pretty much how they've game planned the last 6 weeks of the season and won every game. All right, let's move out to the Big 12. Oklahoma State Bedlam is here. We're at Boone Pickens Stadium. So if Oklahoma State's going to win this game, this is probably their best chance. 4.5 points as the favorite. I don't know the last time Oklahoma State has been a favorite over Oklahoma. That might have to go probably even before, Bob Stoops was there to hit back that far. So Oklahoma State 4.5 point favorites here. What are you seeing in this one?
Well, I'm really tempted to go Oklahoma State here. I saw a stat. I believe it was that Gundy is 9-1 when a favorite at home by more than like 3 points or something like that. This is sitting at 4 points now. I don't think any of those teams were Oklahoma, but
they probably were a
Oklahoma's
lot more like Iowa State.
Oklahoma's offense all year, regardless of who's at quarterback, gives me no confidence in that team whatsoever. And Oklahoma State's I think their defense is probably the best in the Big 12. Um, and they've managed to do enough on offense to win games. So I'm leaning Oklahoma State here. The 4 makes me nervous in the big rivalry game, between these two powerhouses. But if I had to make a play, it's going to be Oklahoma State. But I'm just going to watch it and see how it falls, and then look forward to the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah. I want to take Oklahoma State, but I'm not taking -4.5 in this one. Maybe if you gave me under the key number of 3, I'd be a little more bullish on it, but I don't know how many people know how dominant Oklahoma has been in this rivalry, but 90 wins, 18 losses, 7 ties overall. The last time Oklahoma State won was in 2014. It's now 2021. So that's 7-year stretch of Oklahoma dominating this. In the 2000s, Oklahoma State has won 4 times total. 2 of those were in 2001 and 2, as I mentioned, pretty much before the Bob Stoops era really even got into full stride. So it's just been a one-sided thing where Oklahoma has dominated this team. And, Oklahoma State has been a good team basically for the last 15 to 20 years. So even in that era, Oklahoma State has not been able to really gain ground on Oklahoma. So I just have no faith in taking a 4.5 number off a key number of 3 like that. So I'm just to stay away because I'm not touching Oklahoma in this. I could see them getting beat up pretty good in this game because basically they have not looked good all season long. And it probably would serve justice right if Oklahoma State beat them. And we got Oklahoma State Baylor in that Big 12 championship game because I think those have been the 2 best teams in the Big 12 so far.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, last one, the rivalry in the Bluegrass State, Kentucky, Louisville. I don't know the last time Kentucky has played, but it feels like it was a long, long time ago. Granted, they did play New Mexico State and Vandy in the previous couple weeks, but I think basically after the Tennessee game, we all sort of checked out on Kentucky, and it's been a while, but Louisville, I don't know quite what to make of this team. They've been on a roll here the last couple weeks. Granted, lots of teams tend to get on a roll when Syracuse and Duke are on your schedule for 2 weeks in a row. But the offense has been flowing, 41 points, 62 points. What do you make of this game? Kentucky, 8 wins now. Can they get to 9? Or do they sort of, every time they've stepped up, they've sort of fallen. So I'm curious if Louisville is enough of a step up to where they can't even play with Louisville here.
Yeah, this is a good indicator of how Vegas really looks at momentum when making these odds because, you look at a lot of both of these teams, their record and what they've done this year, and you'd think Kentucky would be the favorite here, which I guess it's essentially a pick 'em, Louisville getting the 3 for being the home team. But early on in the season, these are 2 teams that have gone different directions. Louisville started off rough. And they've been getting better and better as the week goes on. And Kentucky started off really strong, but then they started playing tougher competition. They've been coming back down to earth. But I'll tell you one thing: I've been really impressed with Malik Cunningham and his offensive ability. He's really developed in this offense and gotten a little bit more confident. Not as many turnovers, been a little bit more consistent. And but Kentucky's offense is really ugly, and it's inconsistent as well. And I don't know how many points they're going to put together. And I have a lot more faith in this Louisville team. And Kentucky's really struggled in any game that they haven't been, just big time favorites.
If it's not Vandy or New Mexico State, basically.
Yeah. I mean, they either had, big losses or really close wins against teams they should have blown out. So for all those reasons, I'm actually taking Louisville. I think Louisville's going to win this one big, double digits. Kentucky is who we think they are, and Louisville's going to get their 7th win of the year.
Yeah, I think if you have a play, your play is Louisville here. I'd stay away from Kentucky. It's a little annoying. I was sort of hoping this would come in at a pick 'em, but I think the odds makers have been burned a little too much on Kentucky when they've stepped up in competition. As people, I know for sure, both rode Mississippi State and, Tennessee in those back-to-back weeks when Kentucky was sort of getting the benefit of the doubt spread-wise. They don't seem to want to do that here, even in a game where I don't even know if there's real home field advantage in, Papa John Stadium here. Both these teams are watching their basketball teams play basketball anyway by this time of year, so they probably don't really care. Weather's at 45 degrees, wind at 7, so not much there. You have mentioned how well Malik Cunningham has played. I mentioned probably about 6 weeks ago, I thought Louisville would close the season well. They had a couple more bumps in the road, but now they really seem to be closing the season well. I'm curious to see how Malik Cunningham closes out this year and in the bowl game, and then coming into next year, if maybe Louisville can be one of those teams that sort of makes a leap in the ACC, next year. So we'll see how this game goes. I just think that 3, I don't like that number just because it seems annoying that if this game is played 3 weeks ago, Louisville's probably getting plus to a pick 'em in this one, and now I have to pay points to take Louisville. So, maybe your play is that 146 on the money line. It's not juiced too much on that, which would protect yourself a little bit there. So, but I think the play would be Louisville. I don't see how you can talk yourself into Kentucky after, what we've seen when they've had to step up in competition. All right, short slate of the games of the week, but an enticing rivalry week nonetheless. All right, we mentioned it. You went 5-4 last week. You're one game under 500. I went 7-4 last week, 77-70-3 on the year. I know you got a whole host of picks this week. So why don't you start us off, because you probably have a little bit more than I do.
All right, let's get going through these. I've got a couple. I'm going to start with the 2 I've got for Friday's slate. Actually, a good bit of games Friday. I'm going to take Washington State minus the 1.5 at Washington in this rivalry game. I think Washington State's been playing really good football the last 4 or 5 weeks or so, and I think they're a much better team than Washington, so I like the 1.5.
Well, we're on the same wavelength here because I got Washington State minus the 1.5 here as well. Apple Cup in this one. It's not often that Washington State gets to go into Seattle and probably has an advantage talent-wise and team-wise. So I think if they think they could go in there and steal this one, they're going to be hyped up. And anyone who watched Washington play Colorado last week, I don't know if there's life inside that Washington football team. So, yeah, I think Washington could go in there and steal one. So 1.5, I thought that line was really, really nice. Washington State's played pretty good football to close out this season, even with the coaching situation there. So, and I think that guy they brought in to be an interim probably going to get the full-time job. So, Washington State 1.5, we're both on the same wave there. What do you got next for us?
My number 2 pick, also on Friday. This is one of the games that plays into the interesting tiebreaker scenario in the Mountain West, one of the divisions for the championship game. I've got Boise State minus the 2.5 at San Diego State. Now, Boise State's got a much harder path to get to that championship game. They're going to need some help. But just looking at these two teams and the way they performed, I think Boise State is better, and they've got a little bit more momentum, and I like Boise State minus the 2.5.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this Mountain West closes. And, it's going to be hard for Boise State to make that sort of championship game with the Air Force UNLV game. Air Force just needing to win. But if anything ever breaks right, it always breaks right for Boise State. So, we'll see if they find a way to sneak into that Mountain West game. I think they've been in it every year since they've had it created. So it would be interesting to have a different look in that Mountain West game. We'll see how that plays out overall. But, yeah, I like that Boise State play. I think that's pretty good. We'll go to the other side of things. I'm going to take UNLV, 17.5 versus Air Force here.
Taking them again.
Yeah. I know people, the record of UNLV is very bad, but the against the spread record is 8-4 on UNLV. So they're one of the top against the spread teams. I think Air Force is in a position they probably didn't even think, legit they'd ever be in, which would be to play in that Mountain West, championship game. yes, they've always been a solid team, but, they have their limitations on what they can do. And to be a win away, I'm curious how that pressure affects them, even versus a team as, poor as UNLV, though UNLV's been a little spunky on offense and been able to cover games. So I'm curious on that 17.5 that UNLV continues to cover games on that one. So what do you got next for us?
Next up, I'm going to take a big dog in Stanford plus the 18.5 at home against a playoff hopeful Notre Dame. I think this could be a trap game for Notre Dame. Notre Dame likes to drop these games for no reason out of the blue, and this could be one of those situations.
Yeah, it would be nice if that could happen. So there isn't a remote chance of them getting in the championship Final Four. Now, that being said, it would be a free bet for anyone who's playing them for me. So I will say that would be nice that I get to play Georgia, Ohio State, or Cincinnati for that matter, if they somehow snuck into that Final Four. I mean, you saw what Cincinnati already did to them at their home place. So
yeah.
But it would be nice to get them out of the way, too, and not have them even remotely near there as poor as I think they are compared to those other top teams. All right, back to the Mountain West for me. I'm going Utah State minus 15.5 versus New Mexico. Now, yes, you might think this is a big spread, but one, New Mexico is 1-10 so far against the spread this year. And two, you think South Carolina using a graduate assistant as their quarterback? I don't know if people noticed, but last week they had to pull a team manager out to play quarterback for New Mexico. And their coach, in a quote after the game, said, "We're a bit of a mess right now." So that 15.5, while it looks big, I'm going to ride that. Utah State, if they can get the win here, puts themselves in position to also play maybe in that Mountain West championship game. So I look for them to blow it up in this one. And anytime a team manager is running your team as a quarterback, I'm going to take the other side of that. So 15.5 for Utah State for me.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Utah State is in the position where if they win, they get the division.
I believe so.
They're the one. I think they're one of the three that don't need any assistance if they just win.
I think if they win, they get in. And I don't think New Mexico has a chance really to win here. So what do you got next for us?
Next up, I'm going to take Memphis -6 versus Tulane. This is in Memphis. They've been really good at home. I like them to win by more than a touchdown.
All right, my next one up, I already mentioned it, East Carolina plus the 14 versus Cincinnati. Really like how this East Carolina's team's played. Think big home game here. Cincinnati coming in there might be a chance for them to trip up a little bit, especially since we've seen them sort of play down to competition pretty much all year long. So 14 seemed like a lot here. I'm going to ride the 14 of East Carolina.
My fifth pick, I'm going to take Western Kentucky plus 1.5 at Marshall. I've hated Marshall this year. They've let me down every time I've even glanced at them. And Western Kentucky continues to impress. They've had a exceeding expectations season, and I like them getting points here on the road.
Yeah. Also 8-3 against the spread so far this year. So maybe not all the way in the win column, though. I believe they've worked themselves up to the other side of that title game. Versus your boys out of UT San Antonio. So should be a fun one. I don't know what you're going to do there. They played a little bit earlier in the season, but your two teams of destiny, Western Kentucky, UT San Antonio in the championship game next week. Now, they need to win that Marshall game, but I like that pick. I think Western Kentucky probably the play there. I almost put that one down, but then I just got scared of the destiny of Marshall probably screwing you over like they have all season long. All right, next up for me, we were on them last week versus Lafayette and went in there and pounded them. So Army is getting 3.5 versus Liberty. Why the hell wouldn't they go in there and pound them and run all over them? I don't think this Liberty team is very good at all. So 3.5 for Army. I look for him to go in there, put it on them, I haven't been impressed with Liberty all year long. Yeah, Army's sort of dropped off a little bit, but I mean, I think they're just as good as Liberty here. So 3.5 for me, I'll take all day.
Yeah, I think this Army team is better all around, and that's a good pick. Next up for me, I'm going to take a team that I've not as good as my expectations were this year, but I think they're a much better team. I'm going to take Nevada minus the 5.5 at Colorado State. Colorado State, they keep having these close spreads and then get blown out. So I'm kind of riding that trend there now. I haven't looked to see if there's going to be 3 feet of snow in Colorado State in this game, but I'm going to take Nevada minus the 5.5.
Well, I think we're lucky there because I looked at a couple of the weather places. There's 3 feet of snow right now, but by the weekend, it probably will still be on the ground, but it was going to be more in the mid 40s. So, also Reno, it's not exactly warm there. In case anyone was wondering, that's more on the northern side than the southern side, Las Vegas. So, they aren't all desert people out there. Next up for me, I'm going Kent State minus the 1 versus Miami, Ohio. There's still a chance Kent State can work its way into that MAC championship game. They need to win this one. They've been a little hot and cold all year long. Defensively, very porous, but when that offense seems to get rolling, they tend to play a little bit better defense. So I like the -1 here on Kent State.
Yeah, I've got that as well. Kent State minus 1.5 versus Miami. So we both are thinking the same thing there.
Which probably means they'll give up 70 points.
The way the MAC has been this year, yeah, probably.
All right, next up for me, Florida, -2 versus Florida State. I'm going to ride the wave of Dan Mullen is gone and think we get a good game from Florida here. So I'm going to take the 2 on Florida over Florida State here.
All right. Next up for me, I'm going to take UCLA minus 6.5 versus Cal. I'm going to take UCLA as they got it done for me big time last week, but it took them a little while to get there. But I'm going to take UCLA minus the 6.5.
Yeah, we were both on that one. Once they got rolling, they got rolling. That being said, I'm going to ride the other side of that equation on the UCLA game. I'm taking BYU -7 versus USC. Yeah, probably not a great play, BYU on the road, -7. But anyone who's watched USC play, they have pretty much been atrocious all year long. And other than maybe the coach interviewing for a job at USC while he's over there, I think BYU is probably pretty safe to blow this game out. USC tends to have trouble with power running games. BYU, power running team. So I look for this to be much the same as, I don't know, the last 6 USC games. They get blitzed and lose very badly. So 7 for BYU for me.
All right. Next up, I'm going to take another team that they let me down last week. I'm hoping they follow through this week. I've got SMU minus the 6.5 versus Tulsa. I think there's a good team in there. They just didn't show up last week, and I think they're going to bounce back and be here this week, minus 6.5.
I think they'll bounce back this week. Next up for me, Hawaii is traveling to Laramie. That's not a good place for Hawaiians to travel to. Granted, it will only be in the low 40s there, but I did look at the wind. It's going to be blowing at about 15 miles per hour. It is currently right now about 24 degrees with the wind blowing at about 30 miles an hour. Yes, Wyoming is -10, but they put it on the aforementioned Utah State last week. I think Hawaii going there just probably is a death sentence, especially for the last game of the season. This feels like a land, get your butt kicked, get back on the plane, go back to Oahu, and enjoy your life there.
All right, I'm going to go into a game that we talked about earlier. I'm going to take Wisconsin minus the 6.5 at Minnesota.
All right. We have a fun one. We haven't been on opposite sides too many times so far this year, but I'm going Minnesota plus the 6.5 on this one. I think we get a close halfway entertaining game here between Minnesota and Wisconsin. I mentioned Minnesota tends to play better in this rivalry when they're at home. Granted, they still seem to lose it every time, but I'm okay with them losing it, just not by more than 6.5 points.
All right, moving on for me. I'm going to take a favorite by 6.5 points. Illinois versus Northwestern. This is both two reasons here. I like the way Illinois has
You've
been
watched
playing.
Northwestern play football?
Well, Illinois has been covering a lot of spreads for me, but usually as underdogs. But Northwestern is terrible, and Illinois is playing pretty well for Bielema. So I'm going to take Illinois minus the 6.5.
Yeah. Next up for me, I talked about it, Oregon State plus the 7 versus Oregon. Think this will be a tight game. Oregon pulls it out, late, but I think it goes within that 7-point number. So I'm riding Oregon State and the Fighting Jonathan Smiths here.
Okay, going to the Big Ten game of the week, I'm going to take Ohio State. Big, heavy favorites, minus the 8 versus Michigan.
All right, my last one. I mentioned South Carolina, but I'm going the other side here. I think Clemson's found their offense a little bit, and we also get a step up here where South Carolina's stepping a little bit too much above their weight. We mentioned how good they've been. They aren't to this level of good. I don't foresee them scoring a whole lot of points on Clemson. If Wake couldn't score on them, I doubt South Carolina's going to. So that 11.5 seemed a little bit low as Clemson has found some semblance of offense. I wouldn't call it dynamic, but they're at least capable of getting to 30 points now. So Clemson minus 11.5 for me.
All righty, I'm down to 4 left. I'm going to go through them real quick.
Well, that was my last one, so burn through them, baby.
Speaking of Wake, I've got them minus 4.5 at Boston College. I think they're going to find their offense again this week and get another big win. Next up, we're going to go with my favorites, UTSA minus 11.5 to finish the season undefeated at North Texas. Sans the conference championship.
I should probably tell you, North Texas is tied with Michigan, 9-2 against the spread so far on the year. They don't have a lot of wins, but they've been covering.
Good against the spread this year too. I'm pretty sure if you look that up,
yes, that's
UTSA
correct.
is.
Though the last couple weeks they've fallen off their pace. They're on a 3. I believe they're 8-3.
Yeah, so still pretty solid. Next up, I told you I didn't want to pick a side in this one, but I'm going to take the under 52 in Kansas State and Texas. Both of these teams are struggling. I think Texas has gone something like 5 straight games without even scoring in the first quarter. And Kansas State really hasn't, their offense hasn't been what I had hoped. They started to look a little bit better there, but let me down last week against Baylor. So I'm going to take the under 52 there. And finally, in the rivalry up in Kentucky, I'm going to take Louisville minus the 3 versus Kentucky.
All right, a whole host of picks to close out the regular season for the Dynamite. We'll of course, be back next week for championship week, and then we'll get in probably our bowl special to close out the year, and we'll have our college basketball preview coming up here in probably the next week or so as we wind down college football. So be sure to like and subscribe. We just finished our Achilles Reign NFL Turkey Day show filled with action-packed and terrible games this weekend. But anyway, be sure to like and subscribe not to miss any of that. And we'll see you next week. That's our show, and we're out.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.